So YouTube, Instagram, social media is relatively a dangerous place. Why do I say that? Not because of all the misinformation or the vast amount of stupid trends that are out there, but when you see an item, like a product that shows up on your Instagram reel feed or your explore page or your YouTube algorithm is just trying to show you this one specific product over and over again, it kind of gets in your mind. It kind of works its way into your mind and just constantly reminds you of that certain product. And that's what happened. Basically, my YouTube and my Instagram has been telling me about this one specific camera for like past few months, and there's a lot of hype around it. It's sold out everywhere. If you still haven't figured out what I'm talking about, it's the Fujifilm X100V. Now, since it's sold out everywhere and I generally know nothing about this camera, I'm also not one of those YouTubers that makes a lot of money so I can just go out and buy a random camera just to like test it out, or just because YouTube is like telling me all about this camera, I decided to go rent one. But I couldn't get my hands on the X100V, so I got the previous generation, the X100F. And I went to Texas recently for a mission trip, and so I decided to take this camera with me, see what the fuss is about. Basically, this camera, as you can see, is very small. Like, this is the iPhone 14 Pro. Lengthwise, height-wise, it is smaller than the iPhone 14 Pro. This camera is a APS-C camera. I think it's 26 megapixels. Now, the first thing people see and mention about this camera is the design of this camera. And as you can see, it looks like a film camera. It looks like one of those film cameras that comes out in the 70s or the 80s, or in fact, it looked like this camera. Be right back. It's a rangefinder style camera. It looks like the Canon Net G3, QL17 G3. I can never remember the name for this thing. But it looks like a rangefinder. You look through the little viewfinder on the sides to focus your camera. And that's what this camera is like. It's a rangefinder style camera. It looks like a film camera. All the dials and everything are analog. They're very clicky. There's not like little dials on the sides or in the front of the camera. Well, there's a dial on the front of the camera. But to adjust the shutter speed, you don't just click on the screen and adjust everything. Everything is very tactile. It's very analog-like. When I was taking this camera through TSA, they literally asked me, is this a film camera? Is there film in it? Because they were using that new like CT scan or CAT scan machines, because it looks like a film camera. And this is the black version, so it's a little bit more discreet. It's a little bit more like stealth mode, I guess. The silver one, obviously, it stands out more. It's a conversation starter. This was a conversation starter too. Like, all the people that I met in Texas when they saw me walk around with this camera, they were like, "Oh my gosh, is that a film camera? Why the camera looks so nice?" But no, it's not a film camera. It's a digital camera. It's a APS-C film camera. I just said it's not a film camera. It's an APS-C camera with a 26 megapixel sensor. And since it's the APS-C film. Seriously, stop saying film camera. And since it's an APS-C camera, it has a 23mm f2 lens on it, which is equivalent to a 35mm full frame lens. The lens on the X100F is not exactly the sharpest, so I tried shooting it wide open at f2, and I hear a lot of people say this lens is very soft wide open, and it indeed is very soft wide open. So for most of the trip, I shot it on f2.8, which just by stopping it down a little bit, the sharpness increased a lot, in my opinion. If you stop it down to f4 or f5.6, the lens is incredibly sharp. The other thing that most people like about, or the reason why a lot of people have been picking up this camera, is because they use this camera to replace their phone. Smartphone photography, I've made a video about my iPhone 14 when I first got my iPhone 14 Pro, talked about the camera on that phone, and smartphone photography has come a long way since when it was first introduced. Now computational photography, smart HDR, all these things make smartphone photography great, make smartphone cameras fantastic. Obviously, there's a whole post-processing thing that I absolutely resent on my iPhone 14. APS-C sensors are way bigger than smartphone sensors, so it captures a lot more data, it's capturing a lot more information in your images, a lot more light, background blurs, depth of field, all these kind of things. it's just so portable. I literally put it in my pocket, or like you're wearing a hoodie. You put it in, you can't really see it, but you put it in your hoodie. You just take it out. Like it's even more portable than my RP, which is the smallest full frame camera on the market. But what if I put a 35mm lens on that thing? Do I have my lens? Like, if I put this on my RP, which is about the same size as this body, like it just sticks out so much. It just sticks out so much. So like I can't exactly just put it in my pocket or my hoodie pocket and just bring it with me everywhere. So when I was in Texas, I brought this camera with me literally everywhere I went. It's just like a phone. You put it in your pocket, you take it out, snap a couple of pictures, you put it back in your pocket. So it's extremely portable. It's you can literally just bring it with you wherever you go. If you're going out hanging out with your friends, you want a nice camera, you want something a little bit more than your phone. This is why people took it. This is why people bought this camera. This is why I took this camera with me whenever I was going out to get dinner with my friends during Texas, we were just hanging around the house that we're staying at, when we were just walking around the church that we were gathering at. And the next thing I think people really liked about this camera is the fact that it takes amazing JPEG pictures. Let me adjust this mic. This is actually bugging me so much. If you do a lot of photography, and if you've seen some of my other videos about my cameras before, I always say like you should shoot in RAW, because RAW images gives you just so much more data and information in your shadows, your highlights that you can play around with. You can adjust your colors. But when I went on this trip to Texas, I shot everything on this camera in JPEG because Fujifilm, really, they have some of the best JPEGs I've seen probably out of every other camera. Other camera companies, obviously, their cameras are able to shoot JPEGs as well, but there are times when the other camera companies' JPEGs just aren't able to. I can't play around with it that much. Like here, I can adjust the auto white balance to have like different hints of colors. I can adjust it to a warmer hint. I can like make sure the auto white balance stays on the warmer side, even though it's still auto. I can make sure it's staying on the colder side. I can give it a little bit of a hint of green, some magenta colors, all while it's still in auto white balance. And the film simulation on this camera, that I think is by far the biggest reason that people buy this camera. The film simulation on this camera is obviously not going to be the same as shooting Kodak portraits straight out like on film, but it does bring out a very unique look to your pictures that I usually have to like mess around with in Lightroom with my Canon camera. So you get all kinds of different film simulation. Gosh, I do not remember any of it. You get the standard Provia, whatever. You get Velvia Vivid. You get ASCII Soft. You get Classic Chrome, which is the one I've been using this whole trip. I think it has the best colors. It's a very soft color. It brings out everything is a little bit more warmer tone. It's closer to like a Kodak look, which is so I use that a lot. You get Pro Neg High. You get Pro Neg Standard. You get Acros. I don't know what that is. Monochrome, black and white, and you get sepia, which is sort of like those old Instagram filters, and I've never used it. I don't know if anyone use it, but if you do, use it. If you don't, Classic Chrome. Classic Chrome I think is the best. But yes, the film simulation on this camera really does bring out a very unique look that I think just comes from Fujifilm. That only Fujifilm camera has. At least I haven't seen it on other like Canon or Sony cameras before. Because most people who shoot Canon and Sony, eventually they just start shooting RAW. You can still shoot RAW. Like obviously you can still shoot RAW on this camera. I think a lot of people still do just because they can play around with it. I shot everything on JPEG just so I don't have to like edit everything. It kind of sounds wrong. Like what kind of photographer doesn't edit their pictures? But I just like, you know what, I'm a little bit lazy with this cameras. When I had this camera, so I'll just shoot JPEG. I'll just post the colors what it is. Maybe I'll do some adjustments. Not sure yet. I haven't edited any of it. Overall, this camera, why do people buy it? Why do I think it's like worth it? This camera actually, let's talk about the price. This camera is like $1,300, $1,400 brand new. The X100V for an APS-C camera, that is a lot of money. And I forgot to mention this lens. You can't switch it out. You can't just be like on Canon or Sony or the other Fujifilm cameras. You can't just take the lens out. It's like a Q2 where the lens is like literally fixed onto this camera. There's no way of taking it out. You're stuck with a 35mm f2 lens with you at all times. So if that is a problem with you, if you want the versatility of switching lenses for different scenarios, then this camera is going to be a problem for you. So if you do want to switch lenses, you can't do on this camera. And for $1,400, the eBay is like selling the X100V for like $15, $16, sometimes $2,000. Until Fujifilm is able to catch up with the demand of this camera, get their supply up, I would never ever recommend anybody to buy a fixed lens APS-C camera at that much over retail. Like, it's sometimes $600 over retail. Like, you either have a lot of money to burn to buy an X100V for $600 over retail, or you just, I don't know, just something's going on there, my friend. So even brand new, like, this camera is so expensive. For a lot of people who just want to do street photography, who just want a portable camera that they can take around with, sure, if you're able to justify the price point of this camera, if you're able to justify that investment, that purchase, then for sure go ahead. This camera offers a lot of good qualities. Like I said, the JPEGs are incredibly sharp, so you download the pictures, you can post them onto Instagram or social media right away with minimal editing. If you want to take that extra step to shooting raw, you're able to. Even though it's APS-C, it should still be able to give you a good amount of depth of field. You should be able to see that background separations from your subject in your pictures at f2 or f2.8 even. Or an alternative to this camera, not as portable, but like I said, the Canon EOS RP that I have with me is the smallest full frame camera in production to date. Sure, the sensor is a little bit old, but I think people just make a way big deal out of it. The people saw the statistics saying that, like, oh, this is an old sensor, this is the same sensor as used on the Canon 6D or 6D Mark II or whatever camera it was, I don't remember. Then their immediately thoughts were like, oh, this images can be good. Like, this is going to be a bad camera, sensors are old, like, it's not going to be as sharp, dynamic range are going to be bad, the details are going to be terrible, it's going to be soft. I've used this camera for like 2 years now. Never once did I think that my images are terrible. Sure, there are limitations to it when I'm shooting in low light, but it's not that big of a deal. So if you're unable to pick up a Fuji X100V, I say a Canon RP is still my #1 most recommended beginner or entry level camera. I'll make a video on it soon, since I've been using this camera for a long time and I hear a lot of people complain about the RP, how it's like, oh, it's so old, everything's so old. Like, dude, we say gears don't matter for a reason. All right, if you know how to use your gear, it doesn't matter if you're using the latest R6 Mark II or the A7 R5, or you're using a Canon 7D or 5D Mark II. Like, you are gonna be able to get good quality pictures if you know what you're doing. Yeah, I like, after using it for a week, ultimately, I do get what people are talking about. I do get why people make such a fuss about this camera. It is portable, it's nice looking. I love the design of this camera. I tweeted to Canon, like, as if Canon is ever gonna see my tweets, but I tweeted something a while ago saying, like, if Canon ever made a rangefinder full frame style camera, I'll buy it. Like, I'm sorry, I'm just a sucker for the aesthetics on this camera, and it really does look nice. I can't emphasize that point enough. The design of this camera, I would say this is one of the best looking cameras I've ever seen. Yeah, that's about it. Sadly, I'm gonna have to go return this camera. My brother, like, I do want to buy this camera. I'm not gonna lie, this is a really nice camera, and I have that syndrome where just like, something's new, wow, I gotta have it. It's terrible. My bank account can't handle it. I don't need any of it. So I'm gonna do my best to not buy this camera. Hopefully you don't see a video from me in the future saying, like, oh, guess what, I bought the X100V or whatever the heck is coming out next. Yeah, that's about it for today. I'll be making a video on the Canon RP soon, talking about what it's like to own it for 2 years, and should you buy it in 2023, because it is 2023, not 2022 now. So, Happy New Year, stay safe, I'll see you in the next one. Peace out. And I went to Texas recently, and if you want the versatility of like switching, if you want the versatility of switching lenses for different scenarios.